don't we go ahead and pull up our big board? I want to show you guys and gals what we've been working on here. And Emilio stayed up really, really late last night putting together the horizontal board. So here you've got the vertical board, right? We've talked about this. We pulled information from this the entire time throughout the draft process. And you guys know, anybody who's in our Patreon group, you can scan the QR code in the upper right to join our Patreon group, or just go to patreon.com/Packer Fan Total Access. And you'll have access to this draft board. So we get the legend over here to the right showing you what all the emojis and the colors mean. We've pretty much got all the bases covered. We got it narrowed down to a handful of prospects that really line up with what the Packers like. Shamar Stewart in the 15 spot, Walter Nolan in the 19 spot, TJ Sanders in the 39 spot, Trey Amos in the 46 spot. You got Jordan Birch in the 62nd spot. Then you got to go down a little ways here. You got Anthony Belton. He was a top 30 visit and a Senior Bowl participant. He's in the 115 spot. Ty Felton, I was really impressed with Ty Felton's write-up when we dove into the scouting report on him. He's in the 120 spot as well. Like I said, a handful of guys that are on the Packers short list there. Now, you remember Emeka Egbuka, we've been kind of talking about. He's more or less like the favorite wide receiver to go to the Packers, seeing that Ted McMillan will probably not be there. Now, the Packers met with several wide receivers there that are going in the first round or projected to go in the first round. The reason Emeka Egbuka is not lit up in the gold or the spade is because he wasn't a Senior Bowl participant. And listen, there's nothing he can do about that. Everything else, though, he checks the boxes. Captain Patch met with the Packers early in the process. He also had a top 30 visit. He meets the athletic threshold. You've seen the famous picture of Goody standing right there on top of him doing the vertical as Emeka Egbuka was doing the vertical at the Ohio State Pro Day. It seems like he is on Goody's short list of wide receivers. So appreciate the kind words there, Coach. I'm trying to glance throughout the chat as I'm talking here. But, the board's come together really, really well, man. It was really cool to show Emilio how I build the board. And then I just expected him to kind of be able to help out here and there and maybe throw in, oh, yeah, we can do this because he's real familiar with spreadsheets. Man, he's crushed it. What an asset he's become in draft season. But, yeah, the board has come together really, really nicely here. Now, I'm going to show you a couple other features on the board. And like I said, you guys have access to this in the Patreon group. We can go now. Like if we just go top 30 visits, we've shown you guys this a couple of times. There's all your top 30 visits. The target emoji represents the top 30 visits, right? So you got a list there now of 25 people. Easton Butler thinks there's going to be 2 or 3 that'll probably become public before the draft gets here. I hope he's right. I think last year we got the 28, and then we learned about the other 2 after the draft. So hopefully we'll get as much information on there as we possibly can. So there is your top 30 visits, right? You can also sort in here. You can go just the cheese, which includes the top 30 visits as well. That's all the players that the Packers have shown interest in. 155 prospects out of 562 that are on our board. 155 the Packers showed genuine interest in meeting at some point in the process, right? So that's another cool feature here on the board. Now, the one that I want to highlight, though, if you group it by tier, you hear us talk about tiers. This is how GMs work the boards, okay? And it may be a little bit difficult for you guys to see it here on the stream. Hopefully not. Let me go full screen for you just a second. So you'll notice if you can see my cursor, hopefully you can, all right? So you've got tier -5. That's tier 1, okay? That means anyone who has a -5 to a whatever it is, a negative 0.1, I think is what it would come down to, okay? So that's that top tier, low number wins. And then in tier 0, is basically 0 to 4.9, okay? And when we get to the horizontal board, we did it in increments of 10, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So you've got in the top tier, Ashton Gianti and Abdul Carter, right? And then you go one tier down, you got Travis Hunter, Mason Graham. The next tier down, you got a pretty good cluster here. You got Ted McMillan, Will Campbell, Cam Ward, Armand Membu, and Ty Warren, okay? Then you go to the next tier, and there's only 3 in that tier, Will Johnson, Colson Loveland, and James Pierce Jr. Go down to the next one. You got a pretty good cluster right here. Kelvin Banks, Kenneth Grant, Shamar Stewart, Jahdae Barron, Shedeur Sanders, Mike Green, and Walter Nolan. So that's just kind of give you an idea of how the tiers work on our board, right? Now, let me show you the horizontal board. And Emilio stayed up real late last night doing this. You guys, I'm pretty sure you'll have access to this when he posts a new link once we get everything kind of buttoned up here. But this is what's really cool. It's going to be hard to see, and I'm going to zoom in on portions of it, okay? And you'll notice on our live draft stream, by the way, make sure you're subbed to the channel. We will be in Green Bay, Wisconsin, hanging out at the draft, and then as soon as the draft starts, we will be doing a live stream back at the rental house that we've got, and just continuing the tradition of doing our live draft party type thing. So make sure you're subbed to the channel so you can get on that action, and also be a member of at least the $3 tier on the Patreon group as well, because we're going to be doing some giveaways that night. It's going to be really, really cool. We also got a really cool mock draft contest going on, which it's so cool seeing everybody's mock drafts start to file in. It's a lot of fun keeping up with that. So anyway, let's go to the horizontal board. Now it's going to look wonky for a second. You ready? All right. There is the horizontal board. You're going, what the hell am I looking at, Clayton? Let me show you. I'm going to widen it out a little bit here, okay? As much as we can. And I'm going to zoom out just a touch. So what you do on the horizontal board is you put every prospect, right? Put every prospect on the board, and you'll notice at the top of the page, and I'm going to zoom in just a second. I just want you to see how wide it is. Notice up here at the top, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive tackle, interior offensive line, defensive line, edge defender, linebacker, corner, then safety. Okay, so you've got the positions running horizontally from left to right. Now, as we zoom in, you'll notice these players in the order of which they are graded on our board, right? They are listed in that order, and we did tiers of 10-point increments on the horizontal board to make it pop a little bit more. Now I'm going to zoom in, okay? So let's go to the very top where Ashton Gianti is. As we zoom in here, you will see how you've got the positions listed, right? So in that top tier, you've got Ashton Gianti, and then, of course, you got Abdul Carter. And then the next tier down, from left to right, Cam Ward is your only quarterback in that tier. He's the top quarterback in the draft. Tet McMillan's your top wide receiver. Ty Warren is your top tight end. And notice how you got 2 offensive tackles in this tier. So if you're picking, right, and you want an offensive tackle, and let's say you're picking in the 6th spot, and both Will Campbell and Armand Mimbu are available on the board, you got to ask yourself, okay, Will Campbell has a slightly better grade at 7.0 as opposed to 7.3. You got to create what you call a cluster buster. All right, this is a small cluster. Which one? What's going to be the tiebreaker for these players? You know, for this case, just an example, I'm pretty sure Armand Mimbu, both of them, I think, have short arms. I could be wrong there. But notice that Will Campbell meets the threshold. Armand Mimbu doesn't. However, Armand Mimbu has a wrestling background. Will Campbell doesn't. Right? So you may want to go age. You may say, all right, which one's the younger of the two? And that'll be your cluster buster. That's what we mean when we say cluster buster on the show. Okay. Then you got Mason Graham at defensive tackle. You got Travis Hunter as the top corner in the draft. And listen, if you want to list him as a wide receiver, that's cool. We all know he can play wide receiver as well. I think the Cleveland Browns are the only team stupid enough to play him primarily at receiver as opposed to corner. That's just me personally. But if you want to put him at wide receiver, then it's him and Tet McMillan in that second tier, but the most valuable wide receivers in the draft. So if I zoom out just a touch here now real quick, and let's look at this next tier, you'll notice Shedeur Sanders pops on the board now, right? So he's in the next tier, quarterback. Then you got Colston Loveland, your next best tight end. You only got one offensive tackle in Kelvin Banks. Now look at the D tackles start to pop. Kenneth Grant and Walter Nolan are in that tier. So you got to make a decision. Which one do you like more? Kenneth Grant has the better grade, right? But if you look at Walter Nolan, he's in the gold and he's got the spade, meaning he checks all the boxes for the Packers. He was a captain. He visited with the Packers at the Senior Bowl. He meets the athletic threshold. You had him in for a top 30 visit, everything across the board. He's also, in my opinion, a better pass rusher than Kenneth Grant, and he is that true power 3 tech. Greg Cosell's words, not mine. Also, Dane Brugler's words, not mine. So you want someone who can rush with power out of that 3 tech. Walter Nolan, I think, is your guy. Now, Kenneth Grant, a little bit bigger dude, has an overall better grade on our board, so I can understand someone taking Kenneth Grant over Walter Nolan as well. Now, look at the cluster you've got in the edge defenders over here. You got James Pierce Jr., Shamar Stewart, and Mike Green. All right. Now, when you look at those, we need to throw the purple box on Mike Green. I got to get with Emilio. We're going to put some color code in this to tell us even more information on draft night. And my goal is to have this printed off and laminated for everybody at our live draft stream, where we'll have one in hand. We can mark them off as we go because we're going to be working the vertical board for you guys and gals on the live stream. It's just much easier to see. Okay. So when you look at these three, James Pierce Jr., Shamar Stewart, and Mike Green, let's say all three of those are on the board when you pick at 23. And they're the best available, right? Well, James Pierce Jr. has the best grade. That seems like it'd be a slam dunk, right? Well, he's not as good of a run defender, and he's a little bit lighter. So that might be a cluster buster for you, right? Shamar Stewart checks all the boxes in terms of, Senior Bowl participant. Packers love their Senior Bowl guys. 8 of their 11 picks last year were Senior Bowl attendees. They met with him at the Senior Bowl. He meets the athletic threshold, crushes the athletic threshold. We all know that, right? And a top 30 visit. So you may look at that and go, no, I would take Shamar Stewart over James Pierce because they're in the same tier. If James Pierce was one tier higher, you may go, I like James Pierce better because he's that much more valuable, right? So in an increment of 5, James Pierce Jr. would actually be graded one tier higher. But again, on the horizontal board, we're going to do it in increments of 10. Mike Green. Now, we all know Mike Green, I think, may be the best pass rusher in this draft, but boy, oh boy, does he got some personal stuff, right? So you got to be aware of that, and you've got to do your due diligence. You being, if you're an NFL GM, we're not in-house. We don't know. Goody may not even have him on his board. Goody may have him as the number 1 pick in the draft going, hey, bub, we did the research. I don't think there's any smoke to that fire, right? Or any fire to that smoke, I should say. We'll take Mike Green, right? He's got a wrestling background. He was a captain. But again, Shamar Stewart out of that cluster, he's the one who checks all the boxes. And listen, you guys know I've been pretty vocal. I'm not a big Shamar Stewart fan. I'm not. I don't like the idea of taking someone just because they've got the athletic traits as opposed to someone who maybe has, far better production in the NFL. If you go on over, you got a couple cornerbacks. Will Johnson out of Michigan with a 12.3. Jahdae Barron with a 17.7. When you look at those two, the Packers actually met with Jahdae Barron, and they did not meet with Will Johnson. Now, that's not to say just because they didn't meet with him, you would take Jahdae Barron over Will Johnson. But when you look at it, there's also injury concerns with Will Johnson. Jahdae Barron does not have injury concerns. You also see the V there, meaning Jahdae Barron's a little more versatile, right? A lot more versatile than Will Johnson, who's primarily an outside corner. Jahdae Barron has played outside and inside throughout his entire college career. So you got a little more versatility there. But again, Will Johnson, 12.3, that's significantly higher than Jahdae Barron, even though they are in the same tier. So I don't want to bore you guys and gals too much with that information, but I want to give you an idea of how the horizontal board works, okay? And that's exactly how it works. So again, if we zoom out, you're just kind of seeing that all zoomed in there. If we go all the way out now to look at the board, you can see just how much information is actually in here. I mean, it's all the way across the board, all the way down. Look how far it goes down, guys. We got 500 prospects in order on this horizontal board. I don't know how we're going to fit it on one sheet for draft night. So we're going to do our best, though. Anyway, that's just a look at the horizontal board. When you hear us talk about it, that's what we mean. And when we go back to the vertical board, we'll get it back to the normal size here. Bang, I believe that's about right. Actually, let's go on in a little bit more. Now back to the vertical board with the tiers of 5. It's broken down a little bit more. This is probably the board that we will work on draft night for the live stream. So hopefully that all makes sense. And everybody understands, what we mean now by the horizontal board. I had somebody ask me a question. They shot me a text. Joseph, I think was the name, and was like, hey, I heard y'all talk about the horizontal board. What do you mean there? There's a little visualization of what the horizontal board is. Okay, so there you go with that. Now let's move along here to, I don't know where I guess I disappeared forever. There we go. All right, which would be fine.